Eli woke to silence so heavy it felt like it pressed on his chest. The ship's hum was gone. No voices, no movement. Only the faint crackle of the radio, whispering a strange phrase in broken English. Brains are payment. Brains are payment. His hands shook as he unbuckled, drifting in the dim red glow of the control room. Through the window, the alien station loomed. Huge, cracked, and breathing slow like a sleeping beast. The docking clamps had locked on their own. The air smelled sweet and metallic, like blood left too long in the cold. Somewhere behind him, something wet tapped against the metal floor. Eli turned, heart pounding, and saw a shadow move across the wall. Then he noticed the empty chair. Jonas was gone. Eli's heart hammered as the shadow slid away from the wall and vanished into the dark hallway. The radio still whispered behind him, the same broken words looping like a chant. Brains are payment. He floated toward the sound of the noise he had heard, each push through the air slow and careful. His fingers brushed the wall, feeling the cold metal vibrate under his touch. The ship's lights flickered once, then steadied on a dim red glow. He could smell the same metallic sweetness in the air, stronger now, making his stomach turn. His ears picked up a soft dripping somewhere ahead, a wet rhythm that didn't belong inside their ship. Mara's voice cracked through the darkness. Eli, are you awake? She stepped into view from the next section, her face pale, one hand gripping a short pry bar. Behind her came Dr. Cade, quiet as always, scanning the room with sharp eyes. Jonas wasn't with them. Eli's throat felt tight. He's gone, Eli said, the words flat and heavy. Mara frowned and looked over her shoulder toward the empty corridor. They moved together toward the main deck, each step slow, the gravity still flickering between light pulls and weightless drifts. The hallway walls looked longer than before, stretched, bending in ways they shouldn't. The ship felt sick, as if the metal itself was tired. At the end of the hall, the outer hatch window glowed faintly. Outside, the alien station filled the view. A black shape covered in cracks and dim orange lights that pulsed like veins. The docking clamps had locked without command, their thick arms biting into the ship's hull. Jonas's voice came from the comms suddenly, shaky and far away. I'm inside the station. I heard something calling me. I had to see. His words faded into static before anyone could answer. Mara slammed her fist against the wall. Muttering under her breath, she ordered Eli and Cade to suit up. We're not leaving him, she said. Her tone was steady, but Eli saw her hand trembling as she clipped her helmet in place. The airlock hissed open, and the smell hit them. Thick, metallic, sweet. It clung to the inside of their helmets, even with filters running. The station's corridor stretched into the dark, walls coated in strange patterns like dried veins. The floor pulsed under their boots every few seconds, a slow throb like a heartbeat. Dim lights glowed in far-off corners, but there were no signs of life. No voices, no machines, only the slow creak of metal shifting in the cold. They followed the faint signal from Jonas's suit beacon, weaving through narrow passageways. The station's design made no sense. Some halls ended in dead ends, others looped back to where they started. At times, the air felt heavier, pressing on their chests. At other times, it felt thin and dry, making their throats ache. Twice, Eli swore he saw movement above them, shapes darting across the ceiling too fast to focus on. Each time, Cade glanced up but said nothing. Finally, they reached a wider space that looked like a market. Stalls made of black metal stood in long rows, each one covered in dust and scraps of strange cloth. In the middle of one stall, a human body lay slumped over a table. Its suit was cut open at the neck. The skull was missing. Where the head should have been, there was only a hollow space, the edges smooth like a surgeon's cut. On the table beside it lay small round coins of dark metal, scattered like someone had dropped them in a hurry. Eli stared at them, and for a moment he thought he heard them hum softly. Mara stepped closer, her breath loud in the comms. "Jonas?" she called. But the only answer was the faint sound of something skittering away in the shadows. Cade bent down to study the coins, his gloved hand hovering over them but not touching. "These aren't from Earth," he said quietly. They feel wrong." Before he could say more, the sound of the docking hatch closing behind them made them all freeze. They turned. The path back to the ship was gone. A thick wall of black metal had slid into place, sealing the way. A hiss of air leaked from somewhere above. Then the market lights flickered on, row by row, revealing long stalls filled with objects under glass. Eli's breath caught in his throat when he saw what was inside the nearest case. A brain. Human. Floating in clear liquid. Wires running into the base of it. The glass jar was marked with alien symbols that shifted like they were alive. And in the dim reflection of the glass, Eli thought he saw something move. Not outside the jar, but inside the brain itself. Eli's breath fogged his visor as he stared at the jar. The brain inside floated slowly, its pale folds moving as if it were breathing. Wires ran from its base into a metal socket under the glass where a faint blue glow pulsed. Mara stepped beside him, her eyes locked on the jar. She didn't speak. No one did. The silence was broken only by a soft rustle, like cloth dragging on the floor. Eli turned his head, and from the far shadows, figures began to appear. They moved on thin legs, their bodies tall and bent forward, their arms ending in long, hooked fingers. Their skin looked like wet stone, dark but shining under the weak lights. Where their faces should have been, they had smooth plates of bone, with no eyes, only small holes that opened and closed like gills. They stepped out from behind the stalls, slow and steady, surrounding the crew without making a sound. Each of them wore a belt covered in small, round containers, some with faint shapes moving inside. One of the creatures stopped in front of Mara and tilted its head. Then it raised one long arm and tapped a claw against the glass jar holding the brain. The sound was sharp, like tapping on ice. A low hum came from its body, and a voice filled the air, not from its mouth, but from somewhere in the walls. The words were broken, but Eli understood them. Payment required. Mara stepped back, her hand tightening around her pry bar. We don't have... Whatever you want, she said, her voice shaking. The creature tilted its head again, then pointed toward Eli's helmet with one long claw. Its body twitched once like a shiver, and then it walked away toward another stall. The lights flickered brighter, and the rest of the market came into view. Every stall was lined with glass jars, each holding a brain floating in thick liquid. Some were pale and small, others large and dark. Each jar had alien markings, and under each one lay a set of those same dark metal coins. The air was heavy with that metallic sweet smell, stronger here than anywhere else in the station. It clung to their suits, making it feel like the odor had soaked into their skin. Dr. Cade moved toward a smaller jar near the edge of the row. He stopped suddenly and froze. His voice came through the comm, thin and hollow. This one, it's a child. Mara looked over his shoulder and saw the small brain suspended in the liquid, no larger than a fist. A faint ripple passed through it as though something inside had stirred. Cade backed away, shaking his head. Eli noticed one of the creatures slowly circling them now. It carried a curved blade, the handle wrapped in what looked like bone. Its steps were light, almost floating, but the sound of its claws brushing the floor made Eli's stomach tighten. It passed behind him, close enough for him to hear the faint scrape of its claws against his suit. Jonas's voice crackled through the comm again, closer this time. Don't talk to them. They only understand trade. They told me what they use for money. His breathing was fast and uneven, like he was running. Before anyone could answer, there was a sharp thud in the distance, then silence. Mara turned to Eli and Cade. We find him. Now. Stay close. Don't split. She led them deeper into the market, passing more stalls filled with jars. Some jars were cracked, the brains inside dark and rotting. Others seemed fresh, with tiny bubbles rising from them, as if they were still alive. The creatures followed, keeping a steady distance, their heads tilting from side to side, like they were listening to something the crew couldn't hear. They reached a corner of the market where the lights dimmed again. Here, the stalls were empty. The floor was stained dark in patches, the air colder. In the center of the space was a table made from the same black metal as the walls. On it lay a half-open container, its lid smeared with a wet, reddish trail that dripped onto the floor. Mara reached for it, but before she could touch it, one of the creatures stepped forward. It set down a fresh glass jar on the table, the liquid inside still swirling. The brain floating within twitched once, then went still. The creature pointed at Mara, then at the jar, then at the coins on its belt. Eli's hands curled into fists. He didn't need words to understand the meaning. The creatures wanted them to give one of their own. A brain, fresh, in exchange for safe passage. That was the trade. That was the currency. Mara backed away slowly, her voice tight. "We're leaving." She motioned for Eli and Cade to follow, but as they turned, the sound of heavy metal doors slamming shut echoed all around them. Every exit was sealed. The creatures began moving closer, their long claws tapping against the floor in a slow, steady rhythm. The sound of the creatures' claws echoed through the market as they closed in. The steady tapping against the metal floor felt like a countdown, each step pushing the air tighter around the crew. Mara's eyes darted between the sealed doors, searching for a way out, but every path was blocked by walls of black metal. The creatures moved with slow, patient steps, as if they knew the crew had nowhere to go. The smell of metal and rot grew heavier, seeping through their suit filters until Eli could taste it in the back of his throat. A low hum rolled through the station, deep enough to make the floor vibrate. Lights flickered above them, and the smooth voice of the station's AI filled the air. It wasn't the voice from their ship. This was something older, colder. "Payment is required. 1 life, 1 brain. Trade before the cycle ends." The words repeated twice before fading into silence. Mara's hands clenched at her sides, and she stepped forward. "We don't pay with people," she said, her voice low but steady. The creatures tilted their heads at her like they didn't understand, or didn't care. Dr. Cade's eyes scanned the market, his voice calm but tense. "This isn't a threat. It's a rule. This station runs on it." Eli turned toward him, his chest tight. "You mean they're serious? They want—" He couldn't finish the words. Cade's slow nod was all the answer he needed. Somewhere deep inside the market, a loud metallic crack sounded, followed by a rush of air like a slow breath being drawn. Eli's skin prickled under his suit. One of the creatures stepped forward, setting down a cracked holoprojector on the floor. The image flickered to life, showing a man in a torn spacesuit slumped against a wall. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, and his voice came in gasps. "If you're seeing this, you came to trade." He coughed, his body shaking. "But here, there is only one currency. They don't care about gold. They don't care about fuel. They take what thinks, what remembers, what dreams, and once they have it, you're nothing." His head tilted forward and the recording froze. Eli's stomach twisted. The words were simple, but the meaning was worse than anything he had imagined. They wanted a brain, a fresh one. That was the only way to buy their way out. He felt Mara's eyes on him, then on Cade. No one said it, but the thought was already in the air. If they had to give 1 life, which one would it be? Jonas's voice cut through the silence, weak but close. Don't give them anything." His suit beacon blinked faintly from the far corner of the market. They ran toward it, weaving between the stalls, but when they reached the signal, Jonas wasn't there. Instead, his helmet lay on the floor, visor cracked, the inside wet with something dark. The beacon light blinked slower, and then stopped. The station's AI spoke again, softer this time. 1 life, 1 brain. The cycle ends soon." The creatures didn't move, but Eli could feel them watching, waiting. He looked at Mara, but she kept her face turned away, her jaw tight. Cade broke the silence. "We have bodies in the medbay. Frozen. We could—" His voice trailed off, as if even saying it made him sick. Mara shook her head sharply. "We don't give them our dead. That's still us. Still human." Eli swallowed hard. The seconds dragged like hours. The market seemed to grow darker, the air heavier. He could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Every sound felt too loud. The scrape of a boot on the floor, the faint drip of liquid from somewhere above. A shape moved across the ceiling again, too fast to see clearly. It was the same as before, but now Eli noticed it seemed to avoid the light. From behind them came a deep, slow clang. The stalls at the far end of the market began to close. heavy shutters sliding down over the jars of brains. One by one, the lights above those stalls went out. Whatever cycle the AI had spoken of was ending. Soon, there would be no more stalls left open. Only the crew, surrounded by creatures waiting for their trade. Mara's voice came through the comm, tight with urgency. "We need another way. Now." Her eyes swept the shadows, looking for anything that could be used as a weapon or an exit. But the walls seemed to shift with every glance, bending and stretching as if the station itself was alive and listening. The creatures didn't rush them. They stood still, tapping their claws lightly against the floor, keeping that slow rhythm that made Eli feel like his own time was running out. Eli finally spoke, his voice low. "If we don't give them what they want, what happens?" Cade's eyes met his through the visor. "We'll find out," he said. And the worst part was, Eli believed him. The lights above the market dimmed until only the center of the room was lit, casting the crew in a pale circle while the edges sank into shadow. The tapping of the creature's claws slowed, then stopped. They stood perfectly still, their heads tilting in unison. The station's AI spoke again, its voice calm but unyielding. "One life, one brain, trade now. The cycle ends." The words echoed in the walls, leaving no space for argument. Eli's hands were slick inside his gloves. His breathing grew loud in his helmet. The smell of metal and rot filled his head until it felt like it was coating his tongue. Mara looked at Cade, then at Eli. No one spoke, but the weight of the decision hung over them like a heavy chain. Somewhere deep in the market, a low hum began, the same tone Eli had heard from the jars, like 100 faint voices whispering at once. One of the creatures stepped forward, holding an empty jar. Its liquid shimmered faintly, as though it was ready for something to be placed inside. The creature tapped the side of the jar twice, then pointed at the crew. There was no misunderstanding. It was a choice, or an execution. Cade stepped closer to Mara, his voice low. "We can't fight them. Look at them, we wouldn't even get close." Mara's jaw tightened. "We're not giving them anyone. We'll find another way." Her words were steady, but her eyes moved constantly, searching for any weakness in the circle of creatures. But they were surrounded, and every exit was blocked. Eli noticed movement behind the creatures. The jars in the nearest stalls were shaking slightly, as though something inside was moving. For a moment, he thought it was just the liquid. But then he saw the folds of the brains shift, their pale tissue twitching in slow, unnatural patterns. The truth hit him hard. The merchants were not alive. They were puppets, their movements controlled by the brains in the jars. Those jars were not trophies. They were the true masters of the station. The hum grew louder, and the AI's voice dropped to a deeper tone. "Trade or remain?" The floor under them pulsed once, like a heartbeat, and Eli understood the choice was not only about leaving, it was about surviving the next few minutes. Jonas's voice suddenly filled the comms, startling them. "Let me do it." His voice was weak but clear. From the shadows beyond the stalls, he stepped forward, limping, his suit torn at the side. His face was pale, sweat dripping down his temple. Mara shook her head violently. "No, you're hurt, but you're not." Jonas raised a hand to stop her. "I've seen what they do. They don't just kill you. They keep you alive in there." He nodded toward the jars. "Those brains, they still think. They still see, but they can't move. I can't let that happen to any of you." Before anyone could stop him, Jonas walked toward the creature holding the empty jar. The circle opened for him like a door, the creature stepping back in perfect silence. He removed his helmet, the cold air of the station fogging his breath instantly. His lips turned slightly blue, but his eyes stayed locked on Mara. "Get them home," he said, his voice steady now. The creature raised its claw, and with one swift motion, everything happened at once. Mara turned away. Eli shut his eyes. The sound was sharp and wet, followed by the hum growing louder, almost triumphant. When Eli looked again, the jar was full, a faint ripple moving across the pale folds inside. Jonas's body was gone, replaced by the still, controlled movements of the creature that now carried his brain. The AI spoke one final time. "Trade complete. Passage granted." The walls behind them opened, revealing a straight path back to the ship. None of the creatures moved to stop them. Mara led the way, her pace quick, her face hidden behind her visor. Eli followed, the sound of the hum fading behind them but never fully leaving his ears. Once inside the ship, the docking clamps released on their own. The station drifted away into the black, its lights pulsing like a slow heartbeat. Eli sank into his seat, his hands trembling as he reached for the controls. But when the nav screen lit up, his breath caught in his throat. The course was already set, locked by the station's system. Mara leaned forward, her voice cold. "Where are we going?" The screen showed their destination, another unmarked station, far out in the dark. Eli stared at it, the hum in his ears growing louder again. They were going to trade again.